Hello. In this video, what we will do is discuss the concepts and theories behind master budgets and budget preparation. This lecture will primarily be theory behind budget preparation and different management accounting concepts with respect to budget preparation. But the calculations will be done through the exercise and through the books. Okay, so yeah, let's go to the first slide. So we want to define the basic framework for budgeting. So what is a budget? No? A budget is essentially a detailed quantitative plan for acquiring and using financial and other resources over a specified forthcoming time period. Okay? I think one of the most important aspects that needs to be considered or defined when we talk about the budget is the budget is the quantitative expression of the plans of the organization. So for example, if an organization says that they want to capture 30% market share from their current 20%, that is a quantitative expression of the plan. And for example, to be able to do that, you need to do program A, program B, program C. Okay. Each of those programs should have quantitative targets, and each of those programs will have costs. And at the end of the day, those targets and costs will all be summarized into the financial impact of all of those programs. And those financial impacts are condensed and presented as part of a whole document called the budget of the organization. Okay, so the goals of the organization is reflected also in the kind of budget that it approves or in the magnitude of the budget that it approves. Okay? We'll see more of that as we go through this lecture. So the act of preparing a budget is called budgeting. Okay? And the use of budgets to control an organization's activities is called budgetary control. Okay? The budget is a way to control the organization's activities. Why? Because budgets usually provide managers with the amount that they are supposed to spend on certain things. And if they are limits on what they can spend in terms of the amount or the nature, then you are able to quote unquote control the activities of the organization. And we'll know more of that as we go through the slides in this case. So budgeting is very important in terms of planning and control. So in planning, what does it entail? Planning entails the development of objectives and the preparation of the budget to achieve those objectives. So in developing those objectives, you want to go from point A to point B of an organization of the organization. Pwedeng ang point A is my current sales is 10,000 units. My point B, which is the second plan, which is the desired outcome, is say to increase by 20%. So that's 12,000 units. Okay. And how you will sell from 10,000 to 12,000, there are a series of programs that you can do. You can have an intensified sales program. You can have a new marketing strategy. You can have a pricing strategy. All of those entail costs, and all of those has an impact either in the amount of sales or in the costs or both. So, and those financial impacts are now summarized and included into the budget, which is the quantitative expression of those plans. Okay. Control, on the other hand, is what happens after planning. Okay. During planning, you set the objectives, but during controlling or the control activity, you know, what you want to do is to compare actual performance versus the budget. Okay. And why do you want to do that? You want to do that because you want to make sure that you are able to track whether the organization is attaining the objectives that it set out in its plans. Okay. So uh, essentially, that's what control is. Okay. You want to track down the actuals and check whether it is within plan or on track of the plan. If it is not, there are a series of steps that can be taken so that you are put back into the right path to achieve the plan. A way to control operations is called responsibility accounting. So in responsibility accounting, um, there are different centers called profit center, cost centers, and revenue centers assigned to different managers. And if you're a profit center manager, you are accountable for things that you can control as a profit center. If you're a cost center manager, you are accountable for things that you can control as a cost center. And if it's your revenue center, you are accountable for costs and revenues that you control as a revenue center. So an example of a revenue center is the sales department, for example. No one is accountable to sales except for sales. Diba? It's the sales department. So the sales department is usually the revenue center of an organization, and they have control over revenues because that's their deliverable. You know? They might have some control over costs, marketing costs or selling costs. You know? That could be part of the revenue center as well. The cost center, on the other hand, are responsible over costs only, like the finance department, IT department, you know, and on and profit center are responsible over profits. So that's usually business units, bands, or products. Okay, so they are accountable to both for both revenues and expenses. And why is it called responsibility accounting? It's called responsibility accounting because the numbers, revenues, and expenses are accounted for according to those responsibilities. And if you're a profit center manager, then you are accountable for certain numbers, and we will account for it on which items are you accountable. Okay, that process is called control. Okay, so performance measurement is part of control. What's the nature of a budget? So an operating budget usually covers 1 year, and it states the revenues and expenses planned for that year. Well, it goes beyond that. It also includes the balance sheet and the cash flows of a company. A budget has the following characteristics. Number one, it estimates the profit potential of the business unit. That's the most basic use of a budget, is to be an operating guide, right? It estimates, okay, kita ba tayo this year? Magba-budget ka para malaman mo. Okay? Number two, of course, it is stated in monetary terms. Okay? Although it uses non-monetary amounts as basis. So for example, number of units sold or produced, number of hours worked, those are all inputs so that we can get the monetary items. It covers generally a period of 1 year, and may be divided in shorter periods, say monthly or quarterly. Okay? So it is not unusual if there will be monthly budgets, which when you put them all together is part of the annual budget. Okay? But a budget is only for a year usually. No? Kasi if the budget is for more than 1 year, that's usually a strategic plan or a strategic forecast. No? But budgets are more detailed because they are your guides and cornerstones on how to operate for those shorter intervals. And lastly, which I think is the most important, is it is a management commitment. Pag nilagay sa budget, in-approve sa budget, that's a commitment to the manager assigned to it. Okay, because what's important for you to understand is the budget should be uh, attached, to commitments of different managers in the organization. And altogether, when they do their work properly, dapat na-attain nila or na overshoot yung budget. Okay? What are the uses of a budget? Number one, to fine-tune the strategic plan. So the strategic plan is the long-term plan. But syempre, if I do the strategic plan today, I'm making forecasts for 5 years, 10 years based on information that I know today. Okay? Eventually, what will happen is as time moves along, no, you will make budget for year one of your strategic plan. After year one, gagawa ka ng budget for year two of your strategic plan. Okay? So essentially, it is a moving target. It's a moving number. Okay. And making budgets gives you the opportunity to calibrate the strategic plan because some information that was known to you when the strategic plan was crafted may not be known to you. It might be different all along. And based on new information, you may be able to calibrate the plan. Okay. Second is coordination. Okay. Since every responsibility center manager participates in the preparation of the budget, then two departments can align on the goals in the objectives of one organization. Okay? So during the budget meeting, usually the people in sales talks to the people in production. Naghaharap-harap sila doon. Okay? Because the people in sales will present their sales forecast. And that sales forecast will be the basis of production people on how much should they plan in terms of production, right? Kasi if they won't participate in the same process, then what would happen probably is that there will be misalignment in the resources. Pwedeng hindi na paghandaan ng production, ang laki pala ng sales forecast ng sales. And the budget process allows them to talk together, allows them to coordinate and understand the needs of each other. Okay. Number three, the budget is also used to assign responsibility. Okay, because the design of budgets are department managers are given the budget that they are allowed to spend, and they are allowed to spend to achieve certain objectives. Okay, and so therefore, the budget is a tool to assign responsibility. O toka ka sa net income na 200,000 na, that's your responsibility for the organization. Department manager B, you are in charge of sales of 200 million na, that's your responsibility to the organization. Okay. And it's also a powerful tool to assign responsibility because the budget is ultimately approved by managers from the top. You know, it is approved by the board. It's approved by uh, the CEO. Okay. And so therefore it's a top level responsibility. And because there's tone from the top, it is an excellent way to assign responsibility. And lastly, is it's a basis for performance evaluation. Okay? So the budget represents a commitment by the budgetee. Nung nag-propose siya ng budget, commitment na yun to the organization. Of course, it is reviewed. Pwedeng maiba. But the commitment is still there. Okay? And since it is a commitment by the budgetee to the organization, then it should be the basis of his performance evaluation. Okay? So if you look at the different types of budgets, you know, you have a strategic budget and strategic plan, operating budget, which is the one that we are covering now, and the capital budget, which is what you'll cover in your finance classes. Okay. So a strategic plan is long run by nature, you know, and it's not necessarily assigned by organized by responsibility center, could be corporate wide. You know. It doesn't have much detail because it's a long run projection, you know, and it runs for several years. Okay. An operating budget, on the other hand, is for the organization as a whole and for each business unit and department. Okay? Dapat bawat department may sariling budget. Right? Because otherwise, they won't know how the extent of resources that they have. No? It's classified by responsibility centers and it has the details of revenues and expenses. Okay? If it's for the whole year, it may be divided into several months, you know, and it is a calibration of the strategic plan. A capital budget, on the other hand, is attached to major capital projects. No? So kung merong new plant, meron yung capital budget. Okay? And it is essentially organized by project expenditures and by quarter. Okay? So what we want to zero in this portion is the operating budget. No? And that's the coverage for this class. What is the budget preparation process? So usually there's a budget department. So That could be the financial planning department in some companies. That can be the financial analysis department. That could be the finance department. So it depends kung gaano ka-complex yung finance organization ng isang kumpanya. But essentially, there are assigned uh, departments who will handle the budget process. So this budget department will administer the flow of information for the whole budgetary control system. So when we say budgetary control system, how information flows from budget proposal to budget approval to final approval. And once you get final board approval, how it is cascaded downwards to departments and to individuals. Okay? So that's the budgetary control system. Usually there's a budget committee that is composed of senior members of management that will review and will approve or adjust the budgets of departments. So the usual guy, the usual thing that happens is that supervisors or department heads or section managers propose budgets to middle management. And then middle management deliberates within themselves. They create the budget of the brand, for example, or of the product division, and then it is submitted to the budget committee for approval. Okay, that's what we call a self-imposed budget, a participative budget, or a bottom-up budget. Okay, so it comes from the ground. Na each people or each department or section on the ground will propose what they need, and it will be reviewed as it is submitted to the upper layer. Okay, so I'm sure the supervisor here will submit to middle management. Middle management will review the submissions of its supervisors and calibrate at that point. Okay? Once the middle management is happy, they submit to top management or to the budget committee where a review will again happen. Okay? So the objective of those review is to minimize what's called budgetary slack. What is budgetary slack? Budgetary slack is the difference between the budgeted amount or the approved amount and the best estimate. In other words, baon. Okay, baon ng mga departments. That's a usual case because departments, of course, want more resources than what they need because it gives them a little bit of leeway for errors. Right? However, the objective of this review process is to remove budgetary slack as much as possible, right? Because those are resources that are not used efficiently or effectively, right? If there's a lot of budgetary slack in the organization, then you committed resources to items which will not be used or will be used for inefficient uh, items or inefficient needs. Okay? So that's really the objective of the budget preparation process and the budget review process. Um, what are the advantages of bottom-up budgets or self-imposed budgets or participative budgets? Okay, number one, individuals at all levels of the organization are viewed as members of the team. Kasi nanggaling sa baba yung proposal, lahat sila nakapagawa ng plano nila at their levels. No? It forces everyone to plan for next year, right? And therefore, that creates some order, semblance of order in the organization. Okay. Second, budget estimates prepared by frontline managers are often more accurate than estimates prepared by top managers. Okay, why? Because they're on the ground. They know the situation on the ground better. And therefore, your engineers that's running the business areas or your engineers that goes to the site, they know the actual costs and the actual sources of costs. And therefore, they can create the, budgets more effectively than top managers. Third, motivation is generally higher when individuals participate in setting their own goals. Okay. Um, I guess mas receptive ang workers or yung teammates if they participate in the goal setting process rather than it being imposed from the top. Okay. And lastly, a manager who's not able to meet the budget imposed from above can claim that it was unrealistic. Pero kung sila yung gumawa, there's no excuse because the proposal came from them. Okay. What are some human factors in budgeting? Okay. The success of a budgeting program depends on three factors. Okay. Number one, the top management must be committed and enthusiastic to the budget process. Tone from the top, in other words. Okay. Um, Management, should put enough importance into the budget process so that people on the ground will take it seriously. Now, if people on the ground don't see that top management are serious about budgets, then um, gives them less confidence in the budgeting process, and they might not respect the budget if top management won't respect the budget. Okay? Second, top management must not use the budget to pressure employees or blame them when something goes wrong. Okay? Sometimes the budget is not perfect because, of course, we cannot predict the future perfectly. For example, the COVID, um, what happened during COVID-19. Okay, there was a budget for 2020 that was set in 2019, and that budget is ultimately useless and not useless already. No? And you should not be pressuring employees na habulin yung budget pre-COVID, no? Because circumstances changed already. It's not a realistic budget anymore. So top management must be able to be flexible and understanding of that. Lastly, highly achievable budget targets are usually preferred when managers are rewarded based on meeting budget targets. The idea here is for budgets to be taken seriously and to be an effective effective motivator of performance. Usually, they are also connected into rewards or compensation. Okay? If you achieve your budget, meron kang plus points sa inyong performance appraisal. Okay? So therefore, stretch targets or highly achievable targets, no, um, is okay lang sa kanila, yung mga stretch targets. Kasi alam nila na they are going to be rewarded for it. Okay? So, in other words, we are now linking planning, control, and performance appraisal or performance measurement. Okay? When you plan the budget effectively, you can use it to control actions, or control the strategies of the organization. At the same time, motivates managers, no, to perform better because the budget is now a tool to evaluate performance. Okay? How do you make the budget or the master budget? Okay, it's a long process, and we will not be discussing the detailed calculations through a video because I don't think it's productive to have those long calculations in a video. Uh, Refer to the book, and I will provide a separate um, note on the calculations. Okay, but essentially, we will discuss the process here. Essentially, the budget starts with the sales budget. That's the first thing that needs to be estimated. Okay, gaano ba karami ang ibibenta natin this year? That's the first question. Why? Because everything else follows, right? So the budget starts with the estimation of sales because the amount of sales determines how much should we produce. If you tell me that you'll be selling 1.2 million units, then I will produce more than 1.2 million units. Okay? So production plans and the level of production will be determined once the sales budget has been approved. Okay? So once the sales has been approved, you now go to the production budget. And now, since I know that I need to produce 1.2 million units, no, then we will now decide the level of production. Okay? So by level of production, how much are we going to produce, and how much ending inventory will we use as buffer? Okay, because if the sales department says that they're going to sell 1.2 million units this year, it doesn't mean that we will produce 1.2 million units only. We have to allow for a buffer for the ending inventory, right? So probably I'll be producing 1.3 million instead kasi yung 100,000 is for um, allowance for ending inventory. So therefore, my focus now is to produce 1.3 million units, and they will sell 1.2 million units. Okay. Given that I already know that my production is 1.3 million units, then each of the plant managers will have to now make their own budgets based on the production decided. That's 1.3 million units. Okay. So plant managers in charge of direct materials will now budget for the direct materials. Plant managers that's responsible for direct labor will now budget for direct labor, and different departments within the plant will now estimate the manufacturing overhead. And from there, you can now get production cost. Okay. Since you know the sales number already, you can now forecast for the selling and administrative budget. And from there, you are now able to make the cash budget and the income statement, right? And from there, you're able to get the balance sheet. Okay. So that's the general flow of information. And when you read the book and when you read the note that I will send out, that's also the flow. You know, you start with approving or getting the sales budget, then the production budget. Once production budget is fixed, all departments can now do the work and estimate their own costs. And then those costs come together into a budgeted income statement and a cash budget. And then from there, you can now um, construct the balance sheet. Okay. So that is the process behind a master budget preparation. Okay. Looks, it's a simple concept, but it has a lot of moving parts. And that's something that you will learn as you look at the examples in the book and the additional note that I am including as part of the package. Okay. All right. All right. This is it. Thank you, and see you in the next video.